The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished floors of the Galactic Combat Academy. Captain Kenji Nakamura walked quietly through the busy hallways, his wooden sandals making soft clicks against the metal surface. Students from dozens of different worlds hurried past him, their alien voices mixing into a constant buzz of conversation. Kenji carried his katana at his side, the simple leather wrap around its handle worn smooth from years of use. The sword looked plain next to the glowing weapons that other instructors carried. Plasma rifles hummed with energy, molecular disruptors clicked and whirred, and fusion hammers crackled with contained lightning. "Look at the human with his old stick," laughed Instructor Zrix, a tall Xylani whose skin changed colors when he felt strong emotions. Right now, purple spots danced across his blue face, showing his amusement. "Does he think this is a museum?" Other instructors joined in the laughter. Fexthar, a massive Vorthak warrior, extended his plasma claws with a sharp hiss. The energy weapons glowed bright orange, hot enough to cut through steel. "In my home system, we put such toys in children's playrooms," he growled, his voice like grinding rocks. Kenji said nothing. He had heard these jokes every day for the past 2 years. When Earth had joined the Galactic Alliance, they needed someone to teach at the Combat Academy. Kenji had volunteered, thinking he could share the wisdom of human martial arts with the galaxy. Instead, he found himself treated like a living piece of history. The academy was huge, built into the side of a mountain on Nexus Prime. It housed over 10,000 students from hundreds of different worlds. Each species brought their own fighting styles and weapons. The Kreks used heavy armor and hammers that could level buildings. The Ethereals fought with mind powers that could crush enemies from across a battlefield. The Serpentine moved faster than most eyes could follow. Then there were humans, slow, weak, and carrying ancient metal swords. Kenji entered his classroom and found only 12 students waiting. Most were there because they needed easy credits to graduate. A few came because they were curious about human culture. None of them expected to learn anything useful. "Good morning," Kenji said, bowing slightly. Some of the alien students tried to copy his bow, but their different body shapes made it look clumsy. "Today we will practice basic stance and breathing," Kenji announced. A young Vorthak student, smaller than his instructor but still twice Kenji's size, raised his clawed hand. "Teacher Nakamura, why do we need to breathe in special ways?" "My plasma rifle does not need breathing." The other students laughed. They always asked questions like this. Why practice with swords when they had energy weapons? Why learn to move quietly when they had cloaking devices? Why study ancient human ways when modern technology was so much better? Kenji pulled his katana from its sheath. The blade was old, passed down through his family for over 400 years. It had no energy field, no computer targeting system, no automatic anything. Just steel, sharp and clean. "Your plasma rifle needs power cells," Kenji said, holding the sword up so the light caught its edge. "What happens when the power runs out?" "We carry extra power cells," the student replied. "And when those run out, we call for more supplies. And if no supplies come..." The student paused. He had not thought about this before. Kenji lowered the sword. "This blade needs no power cells. It will cut as well today as it did 400 years ago. It will cut as well 400 years from now. But only if the person holding it knows how to use it properly." A Xylani student raised her hand. "But teacher, our weapons are much stronger. My photon whip can cut through metal walls. Your sword cannot do that." "You are right," Kenji agreed. "But can your photon whip cut through the space between thoughts? Can it find the exact moment when your enemy makes a mistake?" The students looked confused. They did not understand what he meant. Kenji began to move, showing them the basic stance. His feet were placed just so, his weight balanced perfectly. His hands held the sword like it was part of his body. "Watch," he said. He moved through a simple kata, a series of practice movements that his grandfather had taught him. Each step was placed with perfect timing. Each swing of the sword cut through the air with no wasted motion. To the watching students, it looked like a slow dance. "This is how we train the mind," Kenji explained as he finished. "Each movement must be perfect. Each breath must be controlled. When you do this thousands of times, your body learns. Your mind learns. You become faster than thought." One of the human students, a girl named Sarah from the colony on Kepler 442b, raised her hand. "My parents said human martial arts used to be very respected. Before we joined the Alliance, I mean." Kenji nodded. "On Earth, warriors trained their whole lives to master the sword. They studied not just how to fight, but how to think, how to live, how to die with honor. The sword was not just a weapon, it was a way to understand life itself. But that was before plasma weapons, said the Vorthak student. Now we have better ways to fight. From the hallway came the sound of mocking laughter. Through the open door they could see other instructors walking past. Kenji recognized Vexthar's deep voice. The human teaches his students to play with toys, Vexthar was saying to his companion. Another Vorthak. Soon he will have them throwing stones and sticks. Perhaps we should suggest he teach flower arranging next, the other Vorthak replied. It would be equally useful in battle. Their laughter faded as they moved down the hall. Kenji's students looked embarrassed. Some stared at their desks. Others glanced at Kenji to see if he was angry. But Kenji's face remained calm. He had heard worse insults. When he first arrived at the academy, some instructors had suggested that humans should not be allowed to teach combat at all. They said Earth's warriors were too primitive, too weak, too limited by their simple biology. Teacher, Sarah asked quietly, why do the other instructors say such things? Kenji sheathed his sword and sat down on the mat at the front of the room. They say these things because they do not understand. They see only the surface. They see an old sword and think it is weak. They see human size and think we are small. They see our simple weapons and think we are primitive. But are we not? Asked another student, this one from Tau Ceti. I mean, compared to them? Kenji smiled, the first time he had smiled all day. Let me tell you about my grandfather. He was a police officer on Earth in old Japan. One day he faced 3 criminals with automatic weapons. They had modern guns, body armor, and training. He had only his baton and his knowledge. The students leaned forward, interested despite themselves. The fight lasted 8 seconds. All 3 criminals were unconscious. My grandfather was not hurt. The investigators could not understand how one man with a stick could defeat 3 armed opponents so quickly. How did he do it? Sarah asked. He understood something they did not. The weapon is not what makes a warrior dangerous. The mind makes a warrior dangerous. The weapon is just a tool. Any tool can be deadly in the right hands. Any weapon can be useless in the wrong hands. The class ended and the students filed out slowly. As always, most of them looked thoughtful but unconvinced. They would go to their next classes where instructors would teach them to use plasma cannons and energy shields. They would learn to pilot war machines and command battle fleets. Kenji packed his things and prepared for his next class. Tomorrow he would try again to plant seeds of understanding. Maybe some of those seeds would grow. Maybe someday these young warriors would remember that strength comes from within, not from the weapons they carry. Outside his window, the alien suns of Nexus Prime set behind the mountains, painting the sky in colors that Earth had never seen. The faculty meeting room buzzed with tension. 23 alien instructors sat around a curved table that could change its shape to fit different body types. At one end, Dean Zephyr floated in her containment field, her ethereal form shifting like smoke made of starlight. At the other end, Kenji sat in a simple chair, the only human in the room. We need to discuss resource allocation, Dean Zephyr announced, her voice echoing strangely through her translation device. Some programs are not meeting enrollment standards. Vexthar, the massive Vorthak instructor, leaned forward. His plasma claws were retracted, but everyone could see the weapon ports in his arms glowing softly. I think we all know which program the dean means, he rumbled. All eyes turned to Kenji. He kept his face calm, but inside he felt the familiar weight of disappointment. His classes had been shrinking each semester. Students came for easy credits, not to learn. The historical combat program serves an important purpose, Kenji said quietly. We preserve knowledge that could be lost forever. Preserve it in a museum, snorted Instructor Klex, a Krex whose armor made grinding sounds when he moved. This is a military academy, not a cultural center. The humans' classes are a joke, added Zrix, his skin flashing angry red colors. My students tell me he makes them stand still and breathe. What kind of combat training is breathing? Several instructors laughed. The sound was harsh, mixing alien vocal cords that could produce notes no human throat could make. Perhaps, Vexthar said, his voice growing louder. We should ask ourselves why we pretend that human methods have any place here at all. Their species is small, weak, and slow. Their weapons are primitive. Their techniques are outdated by thousands of years. The Alliance requires cultural exchange programs, Dean Zephyr reminded him. Then let them teach poetry or music, Vexthar replied. War is too important for sentiment. Kenji had been listening to variations of this conversation for 2 years. Usually he stayed quiet and let it pass. Today felt different. Maybe it was the way the other instructors were nodding in agreement. Maybe it was the dismissive tone in Vexthar's voice. Maybe it was just that he was tired of being treated like a museum display. You speak of war, Kenji said, his voice cutting through the alien chatter. How many wars have you won, Instructor Vexthar? The room went silent. Vexthar's eyes, large and yellow like a predator's, fixed on Kenji. What did you say, human? It was a simple question. You claim expertise in war. I am curious about your experience. Vexthar's plasma claws extended with a sharp hiss. The orange energy cast flickering shadows on the walls. I have fought in 17 campaigns across 4 systems. I have killed enemies with these very claws. I have led troops into battle while your species was still learning to make fire. Impressive, Kenji said. And how many of those battles did you win? All of them, obviously, or I would not be here. Kenji nodded thoughtfully. Then perhaps you would not mind a small demonstration. To settle the question of whether human methods have any value. The other instructors exchanged glances. Some looked excited at the prospect of seeing the human embarrassed. Others seemed nervous about where this was heading. What kind of demonstration? Dean Zephyr asked. A sparring match, Kenji replied. Instructor Vexthar versus myself. Standard Academy protocols. If I lose, I will request transfer to the Cultural Exchange Program. If I win, he paused. The Historical Combat Program continues with full support. Vexthar's laugh shook the room. You want to fight me? With your little sword? Unless you are concerned about losing to a primitive human, the insult hit its mark. Vexthar stood to his full height, nearly 3 meters tall. His armor-plated skin gleamed under the lights. His claws extended further, energy crackling between them. I accept your challenge, human. But when this is over, do not expect mercy. I would not dream of asking for it, Kenji replied. Dean Zephyr looked troubled. Instructor Nakamura, are you certain about this? Instructor Vexthar is one of our most accomplished combat veterans. His species evolved for warfare. He has advantages you cannot match. Every advantage except one, Kenji said. Which is? He thinks he has already won. The meeting broke up quickly after that. News of the challenge spread through the academy faster than light-speed communication. By dinner time, every student and instructor knew about it. Betting pools started immediately, with odds heavily favoring Vexthar. Kenji walked to the training hall where he practiced each evening. The room was empty, lit only by the soft glow of emergency lights. He knelt in the center of the room and began his meditation routine. His grandfather had taught him this ritual. Before every important moment, the old man had said, you must become still. Not just your body, but your mind. When your mind is like calm water, you can see clearly. When you can see clearly, you can act perfectly. As Kenji breathed slowly and deeply, he thought about tomorrow's match. Vexthar was indeed a formidable opponent. The Vorthax species had evolved as apex predators on a world where everything tried to kill everything else. They were stronger than humans, faster than humans, and their natural weapons could cut through most materials. But Kenji had advantages too. He had spent 30 years studying the sword. He had learned from masters who traced their lineage back over 1,000 years. He understood timing, distance, and the psychology of combat in ways that most warriors never would. More importantly, he understood something that Vexthar did not. Fighting was not about strength or speed or even skill. Fighting was about being in the right place at the right time, making the right choice at the right moment. It was about seeing what your opponent could not see, and being where they did not expect you to be. The door to the training hall slid open. Sarah, his human student, peered inside. Teacher Nakamura. May I come in? Kenji nodded and she entered quietly. She was followed by several other students from his class, both human and alien. We heard about tomorrow, Sarah said. We wanted you to know that we believe in you. Thank you, Kenji replied. But belief will not win this fight. Then what will? Asked the young Vorthax student. Kenji smiled. Understanding. Vexthar sees me as weak because I am human. He sees my sword as primitive because it has no energy field. He thinks this fight will be easy because he has never lost to a smaller opponent. But you are smaller, the Vorthax student pointed out, and weaker. And your sword is primitive. True, Kenji agreed. But what does that teach you? The students looked confused. In Aikido, we have a saying, Kenji explained. When you fight strength with strength, the stronger person wins. But when you fight strength with wisdom, wisdom always wins. I do not understand, said a Xylani student. Kenji stood and drew his sword. In the dim light, the blade seemed to glow with its own inner fire. Vexithar expects me to try to match his strength. He expects me to block his attacks and trade blow for blow. He expects a contest of power. Kenji moved the sword in a slow, flowing pattern. But what if I do not fight the fight he expects? What if I fight a different fight entirely? What do you mean? Sarah asked. You will see tomorrow, Kenji said, sheathing the sword. Now go get rest. Tomorrow will be an interesting day. The students left reluctantly, whispering among themselves. Kenji remained in the training hall, practicing his forms in the darkness. Each movement was perfect, honed by years of repetition. Each breath was controlled, calming his mind and preparing his spirit. Tomorrow he would face the greatest challenge of his teaching career. He would either prove that human martial arts deserved respect, or he would fail and lose everything he had worked for. But as he moved through the ancient patterns his ancestors had perfected, Kenji felt no fear. He felt only the quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you can do. The rest was just details. The main combat arena had never seen a crowd like this. Students packed the viewing areas from floor to ceiling, their excited voices creating a buzz that echoed off the curved walls. Faculty members took their reserved seats, many checking their personal betting devices. Even the maintenance staff had found excuses to linger near the arena entrances. Word of the challenge had spread beyond the academy. Off-duty security forces, visiting dignitaries, and even some merchant traders had somehow learned about the match and found ways to attend. The arena's capacity was rated for 8,000 beings, but today it held closer to 10,000. In the faculty section, Dean Zephyr floated in her containment field, looking troubled. She had tried to cancel the match twice, but both Kenji and Vexthar had insisted on going through with it. Academy regulations allowed for formal challenges between instructors, and neither combatant was willing to back down. The odds are now 60-1 against the human, reported Instructor Klex, checking his datapad. Some students have bet their entire semester allowances on Vexthar. This is unfortunate, Dean Zephyr replied. Regardless of the outcome, someone's reputation will be destroyed today. In the preparation chambers beneath the arena, both fighters made their final preparations. Vexthar's chamber buzzed with activity. Technicians checked his plasma claws, calibrating them for sparring mode. Medical staff verified that his armor plating was properly sealed. His assistant reminded him of the arena's safety protocols. The human will not last 10 seconds, Vexthar declared, flexing his massive arms. The plasma claws extended and retracted smoothly, leaving trails of orange energy in the air. This is almost embarrassing. Like stepping on an insect. Be careful not to damage him too badly, his assistant warned. The Alliance takes a dim view of permanent injuries to member species representatives. I will try to be gentle, Vexthar rumbled, his version of laughter. 3 chambers away, Kenji sat alone in meditation. His katana lay across his knees, still in its simple wooden sheath. He wore no armor, no protective gear beyond the basic energy shield that all sparring participants had to use. His breathing was slow and steady, his heartbeat calm and regular. A knock came at his door. Instructor Nakamura? It's time. Kenji opened his eyes and stood. He bowed to his sword before picking it up, a gesture of respect his grandfather had taught him. Thank you, he said to the door. I am ready. The arena floor was a circle 50 meters across, surrounded by energy barriers that would contain the worst effects of combat. The surface was made of a smart material that could adapt to different fighting styles, currently configured as a neutral gray platform with excellent traction. Vexthar entered first, to thunderous cheers from the alien students. He stood over 2.5 meters tall, his natural armor gleaming under the arena lights. His plasma claws were fully extended, creating a light show that dazzled the crowd. He raised his arms and roared, a sound that made the arena's structure vibrate. The crowd's reaction when Kenji entered was different. Many students had never seen him outside of his small classroom. He looked even smaller in the vast arena, a lone human figure walking calmly toward the center. His simple clothes and wooden-handled sword seemed almost comical next to Vexthar's imposing presence. Look at him, laughed a Krek student in the stands. He looks like he's going to a tea ceremony, not a fight. Maybe he'll bow Vexthar to death, added Azilani, causing more laughter to ripple through the crowd. But not everyone was laughing. In the human section, Sarah and the other students from Kenji's class watched nervously. They had seen him practice, had felt the strange intensity that surrounded him when he moved with his sword. They knew there was more to their instructor than most people realized. The referee, a neutral artificial intelligence, materialized as a hologram in the center of the arena. Combatants approached for final instructions. Kenji and Vexthar walked toward each other. The size difference was even more dramatic up close. Vexithar's smallest claw was longer than Kenji's entire sword. Standard sparring protocols are in effect, the AI announced. Weapons are set to stun mode. Medical sensors will monitor both participants. The match ends when one combatant is incapacitated, yields, or when medical intervention is required. Understood, both fighters replied. Any final words before we begin? The AI asked. Vexthar grinned, showing rows of sharp teeth. Try to make this interesting, human. The crowd paid to see a fight, not an execution. Kenji simply bowed. Thank you for this opportunity to learn. The crowd found this hilarious. Learn what? How to lose quickly. Combatants take your positions. They move to opposite sides of the circle. Vexthar immediately dropped into a combat stance, his plasma claws weaving patterns in the air. Energy crackled between them, creating a defensive barrier while preparing for devastating attacks. His bioluminescent threat display pulsed in aggressive patterns, a natural warning system evolved over millions of years. Kenji stood quietly, his sword still sheathed. His feet were positioned just so, his weight evenly distributed. To most observers, he looked like he was not even trying to fight. Is the human broken? Asked a student in the crowd. Why is he not ready? Maybe he's scared, suggested another. But Dean Zephyr, watching from her elevated position, noticed something the students missed. Despite his relaxed appearance, Kenji's breathing was perfectly controlled. His eyes never left Vexthar, tracking every micro-movement. His right hand rested on his sword's handle with the casual readiness of someone who had drawn the blade 10,000 times. Begin, the AI announced. The crowd held its breath. Vexthar exploded into motion, his massive form moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. His plasma claws left burning trails in the air as he charged across the arena, covering 20 meters in less than 2 seconds. His roar shook the stadium as he brought both claws down in an attack that would have stunned a battle tank. The claws struck the arena floor with tremendous force, sending up a shower of sparks and melted material. But Kenji was no longer there. The human had moved at the last possible instant, a sideways step that carried him just out of range. The crowd gasped. No one had seen him move. One moment he was in front of Vexthar's attack. The next he was standing calmly 3 meters away, his sword still sheathed. Impossible, breathed Instructor Klex. Nothing moves that fast without augmentation. Vexthar spun around, his claws seeking his target, but again Kenji seemed to flow away from the attack like water moving around a stone. The Vortex claws passed through empty air, their energy discharge lighting up the arena. Stop running, coward, Vexthar roared. Fight me! But Kenji was not running. He was studying. Each of Vexthar's attacks revealed information, the range of his weapons, the speed of his reflexes, the patterns of his movement. Like a scientist observing a specimen, Kenji gathered data with each passing second. The crowd began to murmur. This was not going as expected. Vexthar was supposed to end the fight immediately. Instead, he was chasing a target he could not seem to hit. What is the human doing? Asked a Serpentine student. He's learning, Sarah replied quietly. Just like he said he would. Vexithar unleashed a combination attack, both claws striking in a cross pattern that should have been impossible to avoid. But somehow Kenji was already moving before the attack began, stepping into the narrow space between the energy blades. For just a moment, human and alien were face to face, close enough to touch. Vexthar saw something in Kenji's eyes that made his blood run cold. There was no fear, no desperation, no panic, only the calm attention of a master craftsman about to begin his work. Then Kenji stepped back, and Vexthar's attacks continued harmlessly past him. Now I understand, Kenji said quietly, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence of the arena. His hand moved to his sword's handle. The real fight was about to begin. The arena fell silent except for the hum of energy barriers and the soft whisper of recycled air. 10,000 beings held their breath as Kenji's hand settled on his sword's handle. After 3 minutes of dodging and studying, the human was finally ready to act. Vexthar paused his relentless attacks, suddenly uncertain. Something had changed in his opponent's posture, in the way he stood, in the quality of attention he projected. The Vorthak's natural predator instincts, honed by millions of years of evolution, whispered warnings. Finally ready to fight? Vexthar growled, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Kenji did not reply. His focus had turned inward, to a place beyond words. This was the state his grandfather had called Mushin. No mind, no thought, only perfect awareness and response. Time seemed to slow around him as his consciousness expanded to fill every corner of the arena. He could feel Vexthar's weight distribution, could predict the alien's next move from the subtle shift of muscle beneath armor plating. He could sense the crowd's excitement, the dean's worry, the betting pools shifting as smart money began to notice something was different about the human. Most importantly, he could see the openings. Every fighter, no matter how skilled, created momentary vulnerabilities in their defense. Vexthar was powerful and experienced, but he fought like what he was, a predator used to overwhelming prey with superior strength and speed. That was his weakness. Vexthar charged again, his plasma claws carving the air in a pattern designed to cut off all escape routes. But escape was not what Kenji had in mind. The first move happened too fast for most eyes to follow. As Vexthar's right claw descended in a devastating overhead strike, Kenji stepped forward instead of back. His movement carried him inside the arc of the attack, into the space where the claw could not reach him. But he did not draw his sword. Instead, his left hand came up in a precise strike, the pommel of his katana connecting with a specific point on Vexthar's torso. The impact looked gentle, almost casual, but Kenji had struck a nerve cluster that controlled the Vorthak's breathing rhythm. Vexthar stumbled, his roar cutting off as his respiratory system seized. For a crucial moment, his oxygen flow was disrupted. His brain, suddenly deprived of its normal supply, sent panic signals through his nervous system. What? Vexthar gasped, but he had no time to understand what had happened. The second move flowed seamlessly from the first. As Vexthar staggered, trying to regain his balance and his breath, Kenji's sword came free of its sheath. The blade moved in a perfect horizontal arc, its flat surface striking pressure points along the alien's extended right arm. Kenji had studied Vorthak anatomy during his 2 years at the academy. He knew exactly where their nerve clusters were located, how their biological systems functioned, where their natural armor was thickest and thinnest. The sword's edge never touched Vexthar's skin, but the carefully applied pressure was enough to disrupt the neural pathways that controlled his plasma claw. The weapon flickered and died, its orange glow fading to black. Vexthar's right arm went numb, hanging useless at his side. Impossible, he wheezed, but his body was already betraying him further. The crowd watched in stunned silence as their champion, the undefeated warrior who had never lost a combat match, found himself disabled by 2 precise strikes from a human with an ancient sword. But Kenji was not finished. The third move was the culmination of 30 years of training, 10,000 hours of practice, and a lifetime of understanding the warrior's way. As Vexthar tried to bring his remaining plasma claw into play, Kenji pivoted with liquid grace. His katana moved in 3 directions simultaneously, a technique called lightning cut that few masters could perform properly. The blade's point came to rest at Vexthar's throat, exactly above his primary air passage. The sharp edge touched a nerve cluster that controlled the alien's motor functions, and the sword's guard pressed against the activation node for his left plasma claw. All 3 contact points were maintained with surgical precision. Vexthar froze, realizing that any movement at all, would result in his immediate incapacitation. The human's blade was positioned so perfectly that even breathing too deeply would trigger pressure points that would shut down his nervous system. Yield, Kenji said quietly. The word carried clearly through the silent arena. Vexthar's eyes, wide with shock and disbelief, met Kenji's calm gaze. In them, the Vorthak saw something he had never encountered before in combat. Absolute mastery without cruelty. Perfect control without hatred. I yield, Vexthar whispered. The arena exploded into chaos. Students screamed. Faculty members leaped to their feet and the betting pools crashed as impossible odds suddenly became reality. But the noise seemed distant to Kenji, who was already stepping back and sheathing his sword with the same fluid motion he had used to draw it. The entire sequence, all 3 moves, had taken less than 4 seconds. Vexthar collapsed to his knees, not from injury but from the sheer impossibility of what had just happened. His plasma claws were undamaged, his armor unbroken, his body basically unhurt, but he had been defeated so completely, so efficiently, that he could not even understand how it had been accomplished. How? He asked, looking up at Kenji with something approaching awe. Kenji helped the larger alien to his feet, supporting him until feeling returned to his numbed arm. You fought the fight you knew how to fight, he explained gently. I fought the fight I chose to fight, but your sword, it's just metal. No energy field, no computer assistance. How can metal defeat plasma? The sword did not defeat you, Kenji replied. Understanding defeated you. I studied your movements, learned your patterns, found your vulnerabilities. The sword was just how I applied that knowledge. Dean Zephyr materialized beside them, her ethereal form shimmering with what might have been excitement. Instructor Nakamura, that was extraordinary. I have never seen combat technique like that. It is very old technique, Kenji said simply. My ancestors developed it over many centuries. Each generation added something, refined something, perfected something. What you saw today was the accumulated wisdom of 1,000 masters. In the stands, Sarah and the other students from Kenji's class were crying with joy. Around them, alien students sat in stunned silence trying to process what they had witnessed. The human, the weak, primitive human, had just defeated the Academy's most formidable instructor in single combat, and he had done it without hurting anyone. The historical combat program, Dean Zephyr said, will have full Academy support from now on. I suspect enrollment will increase dramatically. Kenji bowed. Thank you, Dean. I hope we can teach many students the value of understanding over strength. Vexthar, his strength returning, extended his hand to Kenji. I formally request to join your program, Instructor Nakamura. I would be honored to learn from you. The crowd roared its approval as human and alien shook hands in the center of the arena. But for Kenji, the moment was quiet and peaceful. He had not won a fight today. He had taught a lesson that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. Sometimes the old ways were the best ways. Sometimes wisdom truly was stronger than power, and sometimes a simple sword could cut through the arrogance of empires. 3 days after the match, Kenji stood outside his classroom and stared at the line of students waiting to get in. The line stretched down the hallway, around 2 corners, and disappeared somewhere near the Academy's main entrance. Students, from every species in the galaxy, stood patiently, some holding data pads with questions, others carrying weapons they hoped to learn to use properly. Teacher Nakamura, called a voice from the front of the line. Kenji looked up to see Vexthar approaching, moving carefully through the crowd of smaller students. The massive Vorthak had traded his instructor's armor for simple training clothes, and his plasma claws were retracted completely. Good morning, Vexthar, Kenji replied. You are early. I wanted to speak with you before class begins. The alien's voice was different now, respectful where it had once been mocking, humble where it had once been arrogant. I have been thinking about what happened in the arena. And what conclusions have you reached? Vexthar gestured at his powerful arms, his natural armor, his intimidating size. All my life, I believed that strength was everything. On my homeworld, the strongest survive and the weak perish. I thought this was the only truth in the universe. It is one truth, Kenji agreed, but not the only truth. Yes, I understand that now. Vexthar paused, struggling with concepts that challenged everything he had believed. When you defeated me, you used no strength at all. Yet you were completely in control. How is this possible? Kenji opened the classroom door and gestured for his new students to enter. Come inside. Today we will begin to explore that question. The transformation of the historical combat program was remarkable. Where once Kenji had taught 12 uninterested students in a small room, he now faced over 300 eager pupils in the Academy's largest lecture hall. Dean Zephyr had been forced to schedule his classes in multiple sessions to accommodate everyone who wanted to learn. More surprising was the mix of students. Combat instructors sat next to first-year cadets. Senior officers on leave attended, alongside maintenance workers who had somehow gotten permission to audit classes. Even some of the Academy's civilian staff had found excuses to listen to the strange human who had redefined their understanding of warfare. "Welcome," Kenji said as the last students found seats. "Today we begin a journey that will challenge everything you think you know about fighting, about strength, and about yourselves." A young Krex raised his armored hand. "Teacher, will you teach us the 3 moves you used against Instructor Vexithar?" Laughter rippled through the class, but Kenji shook his head seriously. "Those 3 moves took me 30 years to learn. They are not techniques you can copy in a few lessons. They are the result of understanding that goes deeper than mere physical training." "Then what will you teach us?" asked a Serpentine student, her scales shifting colors with curiosity. Kenji moved to the center of the room, his katana at his side. "I will teach you to see. Most fighters look at their opponents and see only the surface: size, weapons, armor, speed. They fight what they see, and they win or lose based on who has more advantages." He gestured to Vexithar, who had taken a seat in the front row. "When I faced Instructor Vexithar, I did not see his plasma claws, or his armor, or his strength. I saw his patterns, his habits, his assumptions. I saw the way he moved when he was confident and how that movement changed when he was uncertain. I saw the exact moment when he would overextend himself." "But how do you learn to see these things?" asked Sarah, now sitting proudly in the section reserved for advanced students. "Practice," Kenji replied simply, "but not the kind of practice you might expect." He drew his sword slowly, letting the light catch its polished surface. "This blade has been in my family for 400 years. It has no computer, no energy field, no targeting system. It is just steel. But my ancestors who carried it understood something that we often forget in our age of technology." "What is that?" several students asked at once. "That the most powerful weapon is not the one you carry in your hand. It is the one you carry in your mind." Kenji began to move through a basic kata, the same sequence of movements he had been practicing since childhood. But now, with hundreds of alien students watching intently, each motion seemed charged with meaning. "Watch my feet," he instructed as he moved. "They are always balanced, always ready to move in any direction. This is not because the kata teaches balance. The kata teaches your mind to find balance in any situation. Watch my breathing. It does not change whether I am moving fast or slow, attacking or defending. This is not because the kata teaches breath control. The kata teaches your mind to stay calm under pressure. Watch my eyes. They see everything. The entire room, every student, every possible threat or opportunity. This is not because the kata teaches awareness. The kata teaches your mind to expand beyond the limits of normal perception." As he finished the sequence and sheathed his sword, the hall remained completely silent. Students who had come expecting to learn secret fighting techniques were beginning to understand that they were being offered something far more valuable: a complete transformation of how they thought about conflict itself. "Questions?" Kenji asked. Hundreds of hands shot up at once. The next few hours flew by as Kenji answered inquiries from eager students. They wanted to know about human history, about the development of martial arts, about the philosophy behind the techniques. Some questions were practical. How long did it take to master basic skills? Others were philosophical. How did mental training relate to physical combat? When class finally ended, many students lingered, forming small discussion groups. Kenji noticed that species barriers seemed to matter less than they had before. A Zilani cadet was earnestly discussing breathing techniques with a Krex officer. A group of Serpentine students were comparing notes with human exchange students about meditation practices. "Instructor Nakamura," called Dean Zephyr as the last students filed out. She materialized near his desk, her ethereal form more solid than usual. "I have received requests from 17 different star systems asking you to visit their military academies." "That is flattering," Kenji replied, "but my work is here." "There is more." The Alliance High Command wants to establish a new department, Integrated Combat Philosophy. They want you to head it. Kenji considered this. What would such a department do? Teach other instructors the principles you demonstrated. Help them understand that there are many paths to victory, not just the obvious ones. Dean Zephyr paused. The galaxy has been watching what happened here, instructor. Your methods are being studied on 1,000 worlds. That is dangerous, Kenji said quietly. Why? Because people will try to copy the techniques without understanding the principles. They will see the surface and miss the depth. Fighting is not about tricks or secret moves. It is about transforming yourself into someone who no longer needs to fight. Dean Zephyr's form flickered with what might have been confusion. I do not understand. Kenji smiled. That is why we need time to teach properly. Real understanding cannot be rushed. As the dean departed, Kenji began preparing for his next class. Through the window, he could see students practicing in the academy's courtyards, many of them attempting to replicate movements they had seen him demonstrate. Most were doing it wrong, but that was expected. Learning to truly see took time. A knock came at his door. Come in, he called. Vexthar entered, carrying what looked like a human sword. I wanted you to see this, he said, offering the weapon to Kenji. The blade was beautifully crafted, clearly made by a master smith, but something about it felt wrong to Kenji's experienced hands. This is well made, he said diplomatically. Where did you acquire it? I had it forged in the academy workshops. I studied the specifications of your katana and asked them to make an exact copy. Vexthar looked proud of his initiative. Now I can begin proper training. Kenji handed the sword back gently. This is a fine weapon, but it is not yours. I do not understand. My katana was not made for me. It was made for my great-great-grandfather, carried by my great-grandfather, refined by my grandfather, and passed to me by my father. Each generation added their understanding to it. The sword you carry must be part of your own journey, not a copy of mine. Vexthar's expression fell. Then how do I begin? With what you have. Your claws, your strength, your warrior's heart. We will find the path that suits you, not the path that suited my ancestors. Understanding dawned in the Vorthak's eyes. You mean there is no single way to achieve mastery? Now you begin to see truly, Kenji replied. There are as many paths as there are warriors to walk them. My job is not to make you into a copy of me. My job is to help you become the best version of yourself. As Vexthar left, carrying his expensive but meaningless sword, Kenji reflected on the changes that had swept through the academy. Students were more thoughtful, more respectful of different approaches to combat. Instructors were beginning to study each other's methods instead of dismissing them. The entire culture of the institution was shifting from one of competition to one of cooperation. But the most important change was smaller and more personal. For the first time in 2 years, Kenji felt truly useful. He was not just preserving ancient knowledge for museum displays. He was teaching warriors to think, to grow, to become more than they had been.